Call the meeting to order. As required by the open meeting law, you are hereby informed that the town will be video and audio taping as well as live broadcasting this public meeting. In addition, anyone in the audience who plans to video or audio tape this meeting must notify the chairman prior to the start of the meeting. Hearing none, we'll begin with the Pledge of Allegiance. Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. First item is weekly briefing. Ms. Carolyn.
I just wanted to let you know that the Seaside Marketplace will be opening the sheds on July 3rd. If people are still interested, I do have some openings, so please get in touch with us. And we're having an open house tomorrow to show the marketplace sheds down at Saquatucket Marina. So happy to show people and still sign people up if anyone's interested.
Is that open house all day or?
From 2 to 3, but
2 to
people can
3.
also call and make appointments. I go by appointments too, but 2 to 3, everything will just be open for them to check it out.
Okay, sounds good. Is there any other questions? Thank you.
Thanks.
Any other public briefing?
Lesh?
Elizabeth?
Didn't know what my time was. Hi. For those of you that don't know, I'm Elizabeth Harder, and I am now the Harwich delegate to the Barnstable County Assembly of Delegates. And the Assembly is about to start charter review. And as I have already started hearing from people, I thought I would set up a public time if people wanted to come talk to me about it. Very low key. I didn't want anyone to feel overwhelmed. So I will be at Red's hanging out Tuesday, July 9th and Tuesday, July 16th from 4:30 to 6:30. Hopefully it'll be beautiful weather. We can sit outside. If anyone wants to come by and ask me questions, talk about the county charter, which can be found at barnstablecounty.org. not gov.org, or if you want to talk about anything else having to do with the county. Thank you. Any questions? Sorry.
Is this, will the county be forming a charter review committee?
It will. Right now we are having disagreements with certain members of county government about how we are legally allowed to proceed. We are planning on having the Assembly review the charter. In fact, on July 17th at the Assembly meeting, anybody can come speak in the public comments section and tell the entire Assembly your thoughts on the charter. It will not be done by August, so believe me. This will be at least a year-long process, but it's starting now. And hopefully it will be the full Assembly working on the charter, because then it will be in public. But we're not sure if that's legal. So, but if all goes well, we will be discussing charter changes at every Assembly meeting. So feel free to come. They are the first and third Wednesday of the month at the old jail in Barnstable County, except this Wednesday because we knew our members from Provincetown and Wellfleet would never be able to get home. So we're not having it this Wednesday. So starting July 17th. And just again, July 9th, July 16th, I'll be at Red's, 4:30 on. Hope to see you. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Any public comments or announcements? Hearing none from the public, I have two. Because we won't be meeting next week, these are announcements of events in the week following next Monday. On Thursday, we'll be getting the first of the concerts on Thursday night at the Cultural Center in the courtyard. And the following Saturday and Sunday, there'll be the first of the Cranberry Festival art shows in Brooks Park, starting at running from 9 to 4 each day. And on Saturday from 9 to 1 at the Harwich Community Center, the Lower Cape Kiwanis Club is holding a community flea market. So, anyway, those are activities.
So I just want to comment on a thread that I got the opportunity to read today on social media, shocking. It's in regards to the Chamber of Commerce, and it's in regards to parking in the municipal parking lot. It was quite a lengthy thread, and I do want to applaud Sandra Hall, the moderator of Harwich Old Timers, for sticking up for the Chamber today. But just so the public is aware, beach stickers are sold at the Chamber because they're gracious enough to sell them for us. And there's a $3 convenience fee for the Chamber to cover the Chamber's time, because the Chamber is not Harwich government. They're doing this, Cindy, the executive director, does most of it, along with many, many other hats she wears. So to be completely attacked by the public because of a $3 fee, it's really shameful. Second, the parking in Harwich Port. That was a parking committee recommendation and a vote of this board. That wasn't a Chamber decision. It was also discussed during that vote that Cindy would keep an eye on it, the Chamber director would keep an eye on it, and tell people that it wasn't beach parking, as well as some signage. So the public knows they can come out, even if they have to bring their keyboard, and they can come to the meetings, and they can express their concerns with it, they can express their problem with it, and they can be part of the process. We have a parking committee now. Those are public meetings, and then when it's on the Board of Selectmen's agenda, those are public meetings as well. But they're debating it again and attacking people that are trying to help the town on social media without coming to a meeting. That was a Board of Selectmen vote, not a Chamber of Commerce vote. It is not the Chamber of Commerce parking lot, it is the Town of Harwich parking lot, and we voted on that. So if anyone has any problems with that, they should reach out to the administration office or get on the agenda for the Board of Selectmen and say it, not get behind the keyboard and attack somebody that's trying to help.
Thanks, Mike. Any other further comments? Hearing none, we'll move on to the consent agenda. Mr. Ford?
Yes. Vote to approve Caleb Chase Fund request in the amount of $700. Approve the reappointment of Vahan Kachadorian and Fran Crowley as full members of the Recreation and Youth Commission with terms to expire on June the 30th, 2022.
Second.
It's been moved and seconded to approve the consent calendar. Any?
He did a great job with Vahan's name. Obviously practicing.
It flowed smoothly, though.
Yeah. So, hearing no comments, all in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. We have no public hearings and presentations, so we'll move on to new business. Item A, a vote to authorize the refund of bonds for police station. Carol Cupola, our finance director.
Good evening. I was pleased to hear from the town's financial advisor when as soon as the bond sold in June, I immediately brought up the idea of if there were any refunding possibilities for the town. And there's one debt that the town currently holds. That's the construction of the police station from 2009 that's eligible for refunding. So based on the current rates, or the rates that were in effect in the beginning of June, beginning to the middle of June, the town could save substantial amount of money over the next 10 years, somewhere around $375,000 based on the current market in interest. So if you chose to move forward with the refunding possibility, we would go to the market, We have a timeline for you that I've included. There'd be another Standard & Poor's rating call. We'd prepare all the official documents, the finance office would, and bring you some good results.
Don?
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chair. I was just curious, before we get to the nitty-gritty here, when I was looking at the agenda, I mean, refund to the general public means, wow, we're getting money back. Is this a term of art under MGL rather than refinancing, or?
So in layman's terms, it means refinancing, but for general obligation debt, it means it's called refunding. So when the bonds go to market, when you go to the market to sell bonds, and depending on the stance of the market at any given time, last year when the town sold bonds, they were 10-year callable bonds. So that means they're eligible for refunding in 10 years. This year when we went to the market, they're 9-year callable bonds, meaning the bonds that just sold in June would be eligible for refunding in 9 years. So those bonds were sold at 10 years, callable.
I get all that. All I really wanted was the public to hear you say that this is refinancing.
Just one quick comment here. I find it's kind of interesting, and it shows the kind of work that Carol's doing. Most times, refundings, all the firms on the street, whether they're your financial advisor or they're an underwriter, are always calling you and telling you, you need to refund these bonds, you've got all kinds of savings, I'm happy to do it for you. The fact that Carol, with all the work that she's doing, picked this off and, called the financial advisor, she should be commended for that. I think it's great. It really is. And I've done a lot of it, so,
Thank you. Mike, any?
I have no comments.
Okay.
Just thank you, Carol.
Do we have any further discussion?
Would you able to make the motion?
Somebody want to make a motion? Don?
Well, Steve,
Steve?
Can I just,
Somebody.
Read the motion.
the motion on the,
Read the motion as prepared by bond counsel would be appreciated,
so just,
if you don't mind reading
Verbatim.
it.
oh, well, okay, that's fine, yeah. If one of you have it in front of you, go ahead and do it.
I do.
Don, then.
I move that in order to reduce interest costs, the treasurer is authorized to issue refunding bonds at one time or from time to time pursuant to Chapter 44, Section 21A of the general laws, or pursuant to any other enabling authority to refund the town's $8,750,000 general obligation police station bonds dated February 15, 2009, maturing on or after February 15, 2020, in the aggregate principal amount of $4,250,000, collectively called the refunded bonds, and that the proceeds of any refunding bonds issued pursuant to this vote shall be used to pay the principal, redemption premium, and the interest on the refunded bonds and costs of issuance of the refunding bonds.
Second.
And moved and seconded.
Thank you.
Any further discussion? No, hearing none. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Next item is vote to authorize year-end budget transfers. Carol again.
Carol,
thank you. It's common for town government to have year-end budget transfers or amendments for over expenditures in major budget categories within departments. Mass General Law stipulates that these budget transfers first must be approved by the Board of Selectmen and also the Finance Committee. They can be done anytime within the last 2 months of the fiscal year or within the first 15 days of the following fiscal year, which would be now. I have prepared a detailed listing for you with some explanations in my memorandum for your consideration. There are some significant transfers in the area of debt. Those transfers occurred because we budgeted for wastewater debt that we did not expend because we're going through, the town will be going through the trust, and that debt hasn't been sold yet. So they haven't gone out to market to sell that debt. We anticipated that we would take on that debt in FY19. In addition to that, we thought we were going to sell the Cranberry Valley bonds, which we did not. We did not do that until June, so we had no debt payments due on those bonds. We took the opportunity to pay down road maintenance projects, and legally we can do that, just so that number one, we remove that debt off the town's books, and number two, you're able to capitalize on a low interest rate with short-term notes. And there's some other very minor changes here for anticipated debt, for principal payments, mostly for principal payments. They came out more when we sold the bonds than we originally budgeted about 18 months ago. So those are the significant areas where you're seeing changes where you probably don't typically see them. I don't expect those to recur again, certainly not in my tenure. However, the other adjustments here are mostly salaries, and that's for a variety of items. It's for folks that are out on sick leave that had to be, positions had to be backfilled with other personnel. There's a vacation buyback of 2 weeks for one of the members of the town staff. And then there's plumbing and gas salaries and wages. Your plumbing and gas inspections have increased significantly. So of course your salaries are going to increase with regard to that. And then there's county tax that was budgeted as Cape Cod Commission. It should have been budgeted as county tax. And so those are kind of round up your changes here. And then just so that I'm sure you're aware of this, but Medicare is based off of 1.45% of the wages that you pay. So if your wages increase, well, your Medicare is going to increase as well. So that's another item here that I have included in the transfers.
Okay. Any questions?
None.
Hearing none, is there a motion to authorize the transfers?
I move we authorize the year-end budget transfers as presented.
Second.
Been moved and seconded to authorize the year-end budget transfers. No further discussion. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Thank you, Carol. Okay, the item C is discussion of the Board of Selectmen's draft goals. This was, as I understand it, included in our on our agenda to get the drafts out to all of us to consider and mull over for the next 2 weeks. I got a note email from Larry this afternoon, if I can find it, asking, let's see, very short. Ed, can you remind the Board of Selectmen tonight to send me comments on goals so I can distribute them back for our next meeting? So this wasn't really entirely meant to be a rousing discussion, but as a way of getting the draft document that Steve prepared as a beginning point in the discussion out to all of us and the public in preparation for our meeting 2 weeks from tonight. So, any comments?
No, I'll get some in. I did read, I read Stephen's email, and I think one thing I'd like to clarify is that we're doing goals and objectives separate from the town administrator's performance review. I don't see how I guess we have to accept the goals and objectives and certainly grade in whatever form we come up with. But I want to make sure that we are talking about goals and objectives and not the performance evaluation sheet. That's one comment. Second comment, I think in listening to town meeting, we can talk about this as part of a budget message or as part of the goals and objectives. But my 4 years, develop a budget within the limits of Proposition 2.5 has been goal number 1, and that's charter required. I'm not sure that should be a goal. And if we're going to talk about it based on what town meeting said this year, I think we should be talking about going back, rewinding a couple of years ago when we gave a 2% or even asking the town administrator for a level budget, and not talking about giving 2.5% in any message or goal to start the year. That's it for that, and then I'm a big advocate of goals and objectives with actions and deliverables, because a couple of years ago we debated this fairly heavy. I think 10 basic goals and objectives without actually having actions and deliverables doesn't allow you to come up with anything measurable to grade on. How Chris gets something done doesn't necessarily, I think with actions and deliverables, it gives him a clear and concise path of what we want, rather than a broad statement.
Steve?
I think all those comments are appropriate to put into Larry, so,
No. Okay.
as Larry requested.
Well, no?
Ibid.
Ibid? Okay. All right, we'll take this up again 2 weeks from now. Next item is contracts. Item A, change order for fire station number 2 in the amount of $40,415.49. Approve and authorize the vice chair to sign. Yep.
I move that we approve the change order for Fire Station 2 in the amount of $40,415.49. Approve and authorize vice chair to sign.
Second.
Thank you. And for the record, I find change orders irritating.
Well, certainly spend a lot of paper having to write them out.
Right.
So,
Thank you.
Don?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Wanted to take the opportunity, rather than be critical of things, to say thanks to two sets of people. First to the chief, because this is exactly the way things should operate. We came in with an actual set of bids to town meeting. There was a real contract. There was a total amount that we asked them for. This is living in it, and while I don't like change orders either, this is orderly, and I appreciate it. And secondly, speaking of orderly, we've gotten to the point where we're getting a cover memo that talks about reviewing it, going over it, finding it satisfactory, and recommending us take an action on it. And for both of those, I applaud us.
Great.
And these change orders are not above our budget. They're within budget. And sometimes change orders like these, it's taken some time because we reject. Many times we reject multiple times. So in the interest of the taxpayer, we're doing the best we can. But I just find we pay, I don't want to get off on a tangent, but we pay architects and a lot of, professionals to come in and have the money right, and sometimes they don't. So
Just accept the
that's why we're
compliment.
here.
Okay. So, we've done a motion and a second to approve the change order. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Next item, old business. Review of May 2019 annual town meeting action, pass-fail. Not sure what that means, but.
I think this was just if there was any additional items that, the selectmen wanted to follow up on from last town meeting.
Is there anything you were flagging particularly?
I think that some of the suggestions that were made before, just as a, for instance, Article 34 was to amend the agreement between the towns, Chatham and Harwich, for the Monomoy agreement. So I think, just maybe I'll send a letter to the superintendent, say, yes, we want to redo that, but we have to have the formal agreement that's been agreed to in the town clerk's office in both towns, and just get that lined up and kind of ready to go. Because technically that did not pass, so that would have to be acted upon if so desired. And then on Article 37, the amend the Home Rule Charter, there was ex officio that needed to have a little bit more work done. So I don't know if that's something that the board wants to formally ask the Charter Review Committee to make sure they bring that back as reviewed. But I think that's kind of the flavor if the board had specific items that they wanted to have brought back. On the Lower County Road, I do have, Mr. Hooper's been on vacation last week and this week. I do intend on meeting with him. I did meet with the Water Department, the Water Commissioners and the Water Department They would like to be on the selectmen's agenda if there's a discussion about financing the temporary improvements to Lower County Road. So we are tentatively have that on for the meeting of the 15th, just for folks. We do hope to have a recommendation drafted up prior to the meeting. And that would be for temporary repairs to Lower County Road.
Any other? Don?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. When you're having the conversation with Scott Carpenter, I'm just hoping you can underscore the fact that there's kind of a presumption that if he sets foot in Town Hall, he's alerted Town Hall. And while he talked to us about making changes to the agreement, and we voted to have him come back, actually. We asked him to come back, and then we voted to agree to the changes of the changes. They were never provided to the clerk, which is a separate entity from us, and thereby they were never provided to town meeting, so that nobody had a real good idea of what they were being asked to change. If you could just give them an idea of the moving parts, that the clerk is the clerk, the Board of Selectmen is Board of Selectmen, administration is administration, and most important of all, townspeople. I mean, he can't presume that we're going to be giving handouts to support his changes.
I hear you. We'll pass those comments along. I agree with those.
No, Steve? Okay, one of the items that was taken up at town meeting and didn't receive the necessary 2/3 to pass was the petition article, or was it a petition? Amending the charter from selectmen to select board.
Yes.
I think
That is true.
we should take that up in a formal way and have it prepared properly.
If we were going to support bringing it back ourselves.
Yeah,
I think to that point, Mr. Vice Chair, we did put in there for, on the, I know it's the next agenda item, but on the draft warrant timeline, on August 12th, to have potential articles and assign committees and departments, and to invite the bylaw review committee to come in and discuss. That may be appropriate to kind of, at that point, suggest to them that these are the articles that you would like to have, the board would like to have consideration on review.
sure. Okay.
I can kind of note the ones that we've talked about, though, if folks want me to. Because I don't think we need to have the whole. The other one, just 58 and 59 with a pet burial ground, the Cemetery Commission has voted to turn that back to the Board of Selectmen, so there probably should be a deciding at what road the board wants to go down in terms of that property. Probably two things come to mind is, one, the gazebo and the reuse of the gazebo somewhere else probably makes some sense. And then I know town meeting had indicated that they wanted the property to come back to the Board of Selectmen for purposes of having it be declared surplus and trying to sell that off. So there is a process under procurement law that the board would have to take that vote. But if you are inclined to do that, I do need to send out as procurement officer a request to all boards and committees if there's any other municipal use. Before it can be declared surplus, it has to see if there's any other valid municipal use that exists for that. But I think that's obviously a discussion for another night, but I think that may be something that, responding to the wishes of town meeting, something that probably should be discussed.
Chris, wasn't the language at town meeting just to turn it back over for surplus? Wasn't the language to sell it taken out?
It was.
So right now, it was just turned over to us.
The jurisdiction changed from cemetery to the Board of Selectmen.
So town meeting did not vote for us to sell it.
Correct.
Yes.
And since I appear to have been here for all of the Stonewood Products property when it got sold, and a bunch of other things, some passed, some didn't. If we go down this route, I strongly suggest that we have some idea of what it is that we were planning on doing with the money. Because this failed twice, not on its merits of selling it, but once it got withdrawn, and the other time, I think Mr. Kukunis made a very cogent argument about it on town meeting hall. His comment was, because we were trying to fund a vehicle acquisition fund. And in one sentence, he just torch the whole idea by saying you're taking something that's permanent and converting it into something that wears out. So before we had ever considered doing this, I think we need to have an end game about what it is we were planning on doing, both with the money and where we'd hope the property to go.
And just, Mr. Vice Chair, to that point, there's actually, the law changed probably several years ago, where any sale of property can only be put into the sale of property account or can be used to offset a capital item. So we are gonna be more restricted in terms of that. But just as an example, and I think this went through through town council, that when the sale of property was authorized on Bank Street, that was, the proceeds of that was designed to go and offset some of the debt that was being carried on Saquatucket Harbor project. So that would be the sale of land, which hasn't yet been accomplished yet, but authorized. But that would then go towards offsetting a capital project, which is a valid use of it. But just for folks at home that may think, oh, we can use it for whatever, the law is actually pretty restrictive in terms of how we can reuse that. But I think the point is a good one to link that to something.
But Michael's got an excellent point. The action that was taken was solely to change jurisdiction. We haven't gotten anywhere yet. I sense a goal or objective coming up.
Well, could be. Sorry.
Anything further? Hearing none, we'll move along to item B, discussion and possible vote of the budget warrant timeline. Larry, before he left or after he left, received an email from Noreen Donahue, and I tried to, this afternoon, after Larry sent it on to me, I tried to use my phone to send it on to everybody else, and to no avail from where I was working today. So I got home, I tried to print it out so I could give it to you, and I couldn't do that either. So Noreen, what I'll try and do is send it into town hall tomorrow and see if they can print it out. But she basically writes, "Hi Larry, you and I have had many discussions about the budget timeline over the past year or so. Intent being to allow more time for discussion by both the Board of Selectmen and the public after the TA presentation and before a final warrant. I'm traveling and would certainly attend Monday's Board of Selectmen meeting as this topic is so critical. Last year, after a contentious ATM, many folks said that the public that almost voted the budget down didn't know the implications of their vote. That may be true, and the only way to increase that knowledge is more discussion prior to the budget going into the warrant. Changes after that are too confusing with a very long verbal motion while the public looking at the old printed budget, and that's all they have had a chance to look at. As I cannot be present, I hope you would consider just these items. In FY15 and maybe other FYs, the Monomoy Regional School District came in with a draft discussion in November and December and had a draft submitted on January 15th. The proposed budget timeline has Monomoy coming in on February 3rd, awfully late for substantive discussion if there are issues. I'm sorry we ever moved the TA presentation and amended the charter. Many town administrators give their presentations and submit the budget on the first Monday in January. We used to wait for the state assessments, no longer substantial, so we are only waiting the school, which could be amended by the motion or adjusted during February. You have TA presentation on February 10th, then close of warrant a few weeks after. Unless you go back to the multiple budget days, you will probably have your budget Saturday on the 29th of February and then close the warrant 2 days later. Seems like a wasted effort. If TA presentation was even a couple weeks earlier, you could have time for budget Saturday before school vacation, and changes could actually still be made. You have a line, March 2020, Board of Selectmen reviews warrant articles, and then Monday, March 2nd, 2020, vote to sign the final warrant. So when is review prior to signing and no changes being allowed? I'm sorry for this late query. I've had to travel for multiple weddings and on the road again tomorrow. My only concern is giving more time for Board of Selectmen and public discussion. I think if you look at the draft calendar that's been proposed, the items that were added to it early on in August, September, and October were discussions of the articles which make up the warrant early on, and then a discussion of the articles as they get submitted, starting in November or earlier. We also have several meetings in October, and several meetings in October with the Regional School District and Cape Cod Tech, the Finance Committee and the Capital Outlay Committee to discuss the state of the town, the Board of Selectmen's budget message, the Monomoy's budget and enrollments, the Finance Committee priorities. So we have front-loaded some of those discussions early on in advance. We may want to insert maybe in December or early in January some additional early review of the school district's budgets or the draft warrant as it stands at that point. But I think we have provided for a number of places early in the fall for those discussions to happen. With that, is there any, do we want to take another shot at this, or Chris?
Just a couple suggestions. Number one, I agree with Noreen that the state funding, we generally rely upon the governor to present his budget, and that's what we use as a starting point. The amount of state aid we get is usually offset by the amount of assessment we have, so it usually comes out in the wash. So that's not relevant. But what is kind of relevant, and it generally comes out, is when the governor presents his budget, the Department of Education then goes, or DESE, goes and they make potentially formula changes to what the minimum contributions are and so forth. And what that has done in the past has led to fairly dramatic changes in how much Chatham pays, how much Harwich pays. So I think having that information come in at the end of January to have the budget numbers be a little bit more accurate going into town meeting won't lead to as many changes. The other one is at the end of January is Cape Cod Municipal Health Group usually has 18 months worth of loss data that they use, or claims data that they use, so when we set the rates, we have more information. So some of the factors of having the budget message come out in February do make sense from a finance standpoint for me to be able to try to make adjustments to the budget so we go in as accurate as we can from February until we go into May. The other, we did make the changes to the draft timeline, and I think we sent it out to the different boards and committees, and I don't know if we've heard back yet from all of them to see if there's any other comments similar to Noreen's. So I think it may be advisable to kind of hold off and formally vote it at the 15th meeting, just to give Monomoy, Cape Tech, to see if there's any conflicts that they have with any of these dates, and if it would be a little bit more appropriate. That'd be my suggestion.
Okay. Don?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. In just looking at this and aligning it with what my experience and your past experience has been, I seem to recall meeting in February with FinCom and with department heads. You can't really do that unless we actually have a budget submitted. So those two things, remembering that the charter says the drop dead date is, it doesn't say you can't act sooner, that those two things we should probably want as soon as possible in this, and probably the implications would be at least TA's draft budget would have to be around January to have that meeting with FinCom in February, to bounce around, listening to department heads and what priorities we feel like, well, we'd rather see this as a higher one than that, but you can't do that if we start doing it in March. That's when it becomes confusing, is because we're trying to catch up so that we can meet deadlines and print things. I personally would like to see February again, for those meetings, which would mean necessarily the TA's presentation to us would be sooner. And they'd, regardless of what the formula is for Monomoy Regional School District, I would point out that unless there's a dramatic change, they know what their bucket of money that they need would be. What they don't know is the allocation, to the towns. But that shouldn't be an excuse to wait longer. I mean, they could work on the first assumption, and if the state tells them they have to make a dramatic reallocation, that's another story. That's driven by the state and who gets to pay what. But it's not driven by the total budget that we'd probably want to know sooner rather than later.
Well, on the proposed calendar, we have February 3rd, Monday, meeting with Board of Selectmen and FinCom to discuss first draft budget and 5-year plan with the regional school district and Cape Cod Tech. Is that the sort of discussion or should that discussion be characterized differently?
Well, there's three things. That should probably be for them to discuss their draft budget submission to us, how it allocates. It may be the same, it may not, but that's a separate discussion. But I'm talking specifically about where we'd set aside that Saturday to meet with the joint meeting of FinCom with the presentation from the departments. And whatever that date is, and I would love it to be in early February, that whatever that date is, it should be preceded by the overall budget recommendation from the TA, so that we know when the departments come in that they're asking for their asks, but this is what the town administrator has recommended at that point.
Steve?
Thanks, Mr. Chairman. I think, and I won't speak for Chris, but I mean, you could do it with the caveat that, the state could affect this, so it may change, but you're right, it would be great to be ahead of the game. In any place we can be ahead of the game on the budget process, I think that's something we want to try to do. But we do have to understand that there are outside factors.
Well, if in Doreen's note, she indicated that as she looked at the calendar, the only place to put that Saturday review day was at the 29th of February. But it occurs to me, if the TA presents a budget and budget message on February the 10th, that's the following Saturday, the 15th, we could do that.
I'd love earlier, but 15th is better than where we're at.
Yeah.
Mr. Vice Chair, I'm content to do, I can move up February 3rd. I mean, I would like, the more quality information I have, the less adjustments that are made, but I can certainly target February 3rd, and then if you want to have that session with all the departments on Saturday, do that the Saturday before the school vacation week, so that week of the 10th. I mean, I think that would be doable.
I mean, even from the perspective of the departments, there may be some cogent argument that we're going to listen to and say, wow, hadn't thought of that. But we get way down the road and chaos starts happening and we're not going to be able to listen to that. So it would kind of be a better discussion if we did just what you suggested, is move that back.
Okay. We'll I'll sit down with the town administrator and see if we can work those changes in, and we'll bring it back again. Mike?
Yeah, I think the earlier the better as well. We're not giving the public much time to engage in a budget, and I think that after this year's town meeting and a fairly large group of people that are already meeting on our budgets, I think that there's gonna be a lot more questions this year on the budget, and a lot more public input, and we should give them the time. The only other question I have is, Ed, you added language under Monday, March 2nd. No new information changes will be added to the warrant after this date. I know we had this conversation throughout the year this year, and that seemed to be your position, not town council's position or the rest of the board, so I'd like that removed.
Well, I was the author, I get to put, but if you want to remove it, it's up to the board, but, my problem is, we have, where is it? On Monday, February 24th, we're supposed to present the articles, all of the articles to the Finance Committee, but how can we do that if we're still submitting them and changing them?
I agree with that, but I think that the intent of that language was people submitting articles or us submitting articles. But I think town council was quite clear, it's our warrant, we can change it up until it goes to print if we want. Chris, correct me if I'm wrong, but as long as submissions are made by the public, the board has the right to change the warrant up until it goes to print because it's our warrant.
Yeah, the elements of the warrant articles that the board puts together, those can be placeholders and changed. When a citizen submits, we cannot amend or change that. So often, town council will find little tweaks here and there that need to be done, and I think it is advisable to allow council to have those opportunities to tweak before the final warrant is issued.
Steve?
Thanks, Mr. Chair. Under that logic, then, wouldn't it make sense that if it was up to the selectmen, that we would have the authority to have a drop-dead date, so that it would be a more predictable process?
Yeah.
I mean, under the logic that you just presented.
Sure, but what if there's a mistake and what if there's a change? We were changing the warrant this year right up until it went to print, because Chris was finding additional information. So don't we want to give ourselves a latitude? And I guess we could put a drop-dead date on it if we want to put a drop-dead date on it, because we're the board and we can re-vote it.
Yeah.
But I don't see the point in having the language when we have a contradicting statement from our town attorney.
First off, one of the things that, because of this problem of the articles coming in later on, I've set several points during the calendar early on in the fall where we discuss the articles, so we sort of get them out in front of the process, and hopefully by the time we get to the submission deadline date in February, we've seen most of the articles and have been able to talk through them and corrected them. But I've read the attorney's opinion, and I've read the language in the charter and bylaws, and I can't find anywhere an indication that would lead you to follow the town attorney's opinion. And quite honestly, it's not settled law, it's his opinion. And the only folks I understand in the state that can tell us what it actually means in a final ruling is the Supreme Judicial Council. So, and, we do have the ability of disagreeing with our town attorney when we think his opinion is wrong, and I know we've done that in the past.
So I'd ask that we put this on an agenda for the board to vote, because I know last year Don, myself, and Larry agreed that we could change it up until when we want. So we'll debate it amongst ourselves and then vote.
I would agree with that.
It's still draft, so however you want to make changes to the draft.
No, Mr. Chair, this isn't about who wins and who loses in a particular argument. This, in all deference, in my time as chair of the bylaw committee, I viewed that as a bifurcated statement. The articles get submitted to us, even from inside the government, like the planning board, whatever. But there are articles that we ourselves sponsor and are included. And then there's the issue of, except for CPC articles, Mass General Law provides that it's our warrant. So I disagree that the Supreme Judicial Court would ever get involved with that, because other than the CPC type articles, we have jurisdiction by state statute over this. The only comment I would make to Stephen is, you can't know what you don't know if you don't know it. And periodically, we do find that we get trapped by a date that we find a circumstance has arisen, and wow, we need to be able to take an action to change some language. But I do agree with the chair, it would be really nice to have most things in order so that we could just take the occasional problem and deal with that.
Thanks, Mr. Chair. You know, I agree, you know, and I think it's all we're trying to do here is provide greater efficiency and clarity to the process, you know, and we saw in town meeting, you know, that there was a lot of concern about the process and our preparedness, and maybe this is one of the things, as Michael said, we should have a, you know, bring it back and let's discuss it.
Okay. All right. So that's all for the discussion of the warrant timeline. Town Administrator's report.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I do have a couple things this evening. One is really kind of positive. Seaport Economic Council, that has provided funding for the Saquatucket Marina landside and waterside, $1 million each, has asked to have one of their meetings here in Harwich, in this meeting room. So that would be on August 27th, 2019. From 2 o'clock to 3 o'clock, so the Seaport Council would meet here in Town Hall, with the idea that at 3:15, shortly after, they would go down to a ribbon cutting ceremony at the harbor, so they want to see the work that they've done. I think also it would be a nice idea to put in a plug for the sidewalk to connect Saquatucket Harbor to the Harwich Port.
The safe harbor sidewalk.
I just, it's not a bad idea having them down and have them see the concerns that we've raised. One other, or two other things that I have here, just on the ZBA, we had contract one, and actually phase two of the sewer project. We had pump stations that needed to get approval in terms of having a structure that was not compliant with the setbacks. So we did have town staff went, town council went, Amy, can't think of Amy's last name. But, so we had council there, and the ZBA did approve those elements, so we are good with the zoning board of appeals. That was really just that we put a structure up in their front yard as opposed to having a pump in their front yard. We do, the order of taking was filed in a timely fashion, so we got all the paperwork into the state revolving loan fund. I just wanted to thank Griffin Ryder for his outstanding effort to kind of help to shepherd that through. I think Joe also was very helpful to get all that material, but we have that all in. And just so folks did see that we did the easements, there was a eminent domain taking. There will be notices that will be sent out. We have a legal obligation to send out within 60 days, just notifying them of that action. So that will be. And then I did provide to the board that there was a little bit of an issue on Beach 22, and I did send out a clarification. The police chief asked me for enforcement, a clearer roadmap, if you would, for enforcement. So I did send out some of that material today. And then I will have for probably the next meeting, just the non-resident taxpayer. I'll do a draft of that if there's anything that the board wants to have departments come in and do a presentation. Generally in August, the board hosts a meeting in which non-resident taxpayers are invited to come in and express any concerns they may have in terms of the operation of the town. And we will do a financial overview, and I think we normally do recreation and DPW-related items. So we will, forward-thinking, put those items on there. But we'll do a draft agenda and get that on the board agenda if there's any additional items the board would like to see addressed at that meeting. That concludes my comments this evening, Mr. Chair.
All right. Selectmen?
Now, nobody make fun of me when I,
Mr. Aloha.
nobody make fun. Yeah, okay, well, that shows you how much everyone listens. But no one's gonna make fun of me, but I went to the library over the weekend. And they had a celebration for the redoing of the Brooks Library. And it was really, it's something, I remember, this goes back a lot of years, but I remember Leo Deal, he made a comment to me about 22 years ago that a community is judged by its library and how it treats its citizens. We got a heck of a good library. I know it's got a robust programming, and it was really good to see all the fencing down, the painting done. Building looks great, library's terrific.
Steve?
I would second what Don said. My disappointment was I got food poisoning and couldn't go to the event, so I was very disappointed not to, because my mom was one of the librarians for many years there, and I remember the way the library was, and to see it the way it is today is just so impressive. It's just a wonderful thing. So.
I have nothing.
Yeah. Well, I had also had hoped to make it to the celebration. However, we had family arriving late Saturday, and we had a sort of, my wife and I had a honey-do list around the house. But I do remember before the current the renovations that were done in the late 90s were done. My wife and daughters were back. Unfortunately, it was all about her mother being in failing health, but in 90, she and the girls came back and spent a month and a half here, and was all their refuge was the then upstairs children's room at the old library. And when she left, she had found out that there was a movement ahead to make the improvements, and so she, before leaving town, wrote a letter supporting making the improvements and maintaining a solid children's library facility. She wrote the letter to Kroll. What's Kroll's first name? Bill,
Yeah.
who was her mother's attorney at the time and a member of the board looking at the changes. And so when we moved back and found out that it had been all done, we were thrilled, and are continue to be thrilled by the services provided. Yes?
While we're still here,
Yep.
as a reminder, there was a newly created ad hoc noise containment committee, and it's looking for new members. So, as Michael pointed out, we needed to wait for a charge, but
I'm speaking to a couple people that I might send to you guys that expressed an interest in me before, and I'm just trying to catch back up with them to remind them that they should get their name
In touch.
to you guys.
Good.
and there will be an opening on the planning board at some point in the next few months, so it'd be nice, that, the regulatory boards are very important. They affect people's lives and their biggest investment. It's important that serious people step forward and try to represent the town, so if someone wants to submit some applications, it would be terrific.
And with that said, maybe staff could provide the vacancy list for all committees for the 15th. There's there is a fair amount of vacancies.
You know, as you comment on the planning board, I just got to say, I was at the planning board meeting the other night. They were dealing, you know, with the whole West Harwich issue, and that board did a tremendous job. I mean, they listened to every single person, which is what they should do. And I think the deliberations showed, you know, how good they are at what they're trying to do. So I just want to, you know, give a high sign for that.
Thank you, Mary, in the back row.
Oh, yeah. Thanks, Mary.
All right.
Motion to adjourn?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.